many people that have somewhat of a religious nature, it's always, it's not trying to connect up with God. And people do a lot of, sometimes even strange things to connect with the concept of God. If you're from Africa, you might be like this guy, doing some kind of tribal dance, to connect with your God. If you're of the Jewish faith, you might travel to Jerusalem to the Wailing Wall, which is the base of this. A lot of you know is the actual foundation of Solomon's temple. About the only thing that remained afterwards. This Buddhist fella, going to get up with God, maybe get some of you like your tats. How about that? All over your face, find his peace with his tattoos. Maybe you're a Muslim, you just made it to Mecca, one of these holy pilgrimages, and this is what they want to do. Now, if you're a Hindu and you're wanting it to rain, you go to your rain god and you sit in rainwater, I guess, and hopefully it'll rain for you. Of course, as Christians, prayer is the access. If you don't know where you're going, if you look at all the religions, maybe this is you. So I don't know. How do we connect with God? How does God hear us? For some people, God does all the listening. God doesn't say anything. He's always listening. You pray to God and you think He hears you, but 100%, I just don't know. You just kind of hang on until one day you die and you go to heaven, and then God maybe will speak to you. But up to that point, as we live this life, we just don't know. But some of you are right there this morning. Now, others of you that could be here, or people that you run into, maybe you got neighbors like this. God never shuts up. He's talking about everything. He tells you when to brush your teeth, when who to hire to mow your lawn, when to buy popcorn at the movie theater or whatever. God is just constantly talking. And that makes me feel just about as much uncomfortable as not thinking that God speaks at all. And for me, usually it's somewhere there in the balance. It's somewhere there between the two extremes that we find God most often. But I do know this, is that what God has to say to us is more important than what we have to say to Him. What God says to us is a lot more important than what we have to say to Him. Well, how do you listen to God? You know what the voice of God sounds like? It is a man's voice. It's just this ethereal kind of thing that happens, this mystical, metaphysical kind of thing that happens. Well, how do you know the voice of God? How do you know when God's speaking to you? How do you know when God is leading you? The Bible talks about the inner ear of the heart. Sometimes it's called the circumcised ear. And, wow. Really? They cut off my earlobe? No, that's not what it's talking about in a very symbolic sense. Those that were not the uncircumcised in biblical times were those that were not a part of God's people. And so when the Bible talks about the circumcised ear, it's talking about those that are believers in God that become attuned to what God is trying to say and do in their lives. Sometimes it's like a foreboding in your spirit. The idea of you shouldn't go there, or you should go there, or you need to be careful, or you need to go the other way, or we're going to see that person. I've had a few times in my ministry that it's felt like, one time I was heading into the offices years ago, and something said, just stop by and check in on this person. Went and knocked on the door, a family member comes out and said, who in the world called you? I said, nobody called me. And the person that I'd gone to see 5 minutes before had passed away. You gotta give God the credit. Sometimes if you just kind of, because you know. Now the problem is we live in such a world of so much noise. I wonder sometimes if God is the one saying to us, can you hear me now? We live in this workaholic, shopaholic, goaholic, activity-aholic world, and that we become so inundated with things that are going on. If God tried to speak to us, we can't hear Him over all the noise, all the cacophony of sounds. And if you look at our movie industry, apparently we like explosions, and we like crashes, and we like screams, and we like the loud music. We like all these things. So we live in a world of surround sound TV, and earbuds, listening to Pandora, and sounds of the spouse talking, and the children chattering, and the animals barking, just goes on and on and on, and God says, can you hear me? And then we wonder, why does not God ever speak to me? And maybe God said, I'm trying. But we got so much inundating this, we can't hear him if he did speak to us. There's a little saying that I like to read every once in a while. It's by a guy named Tim Hansel. He wrote it in a book, When I Relax, I Feel Guilty. And this is what he says, and see if it doesn't apply to you just a little bit. He says, slow me down, Lord. Ease the pounding of my heart by the quieting of my mind. Steady my hurried pace with the vision of the eternal reach of time. Give me, amid the confusion of the day, the calmness of the everlasting hills. Break the tensions of my nerves and muscles with the soothing music of the singing streams that live in my memory. Teach me the art of taking minute vacations, of slowing down to look at a flower, to chat with a friend, to pat a dog, to smile at a child, to read a few lines from a good book. Slow me down, Lord, and inspire me to send my roots deep into the soil of life's enduring values, that I may grow toward my greater destiny. Remind me each day that the race is not always to the swift, that there is more to life than increasing its speed. Let me look upward to the towering oak and know that it grew great and strong because it grew slowly and well. There were some Americans, wealthy Americans in Africa on a hunting expedition. They hired some locals to carry their supplies, and after traveling for some time, they looked back, and the natives were not with them. They went back and got on to them. You know, like, y'all lazy, what's going on? And the leader of the group said, sir, we don't want to disrespect you. We just need to take time for our spirits to catch up with our bodies. Maybe some of you here this morning need to slow up just a little bit for your spirit to catch up with your body. And if you're not careful, one of these days, you're going to be getting to that point where you're going to have to slow up. When you get close to that retirement age, you're going to wonder where life is going, and you've lost so many precious moments. When was the last time you sat with your family after a meal at a table and just enjoyed each other's company? When's the last time you flew a kite? When's the last time you went for a walk in the woods? When's the last time you sat in a warm bath and just read a few chapters out of the book? When's the last time you listened to some soothing music for just about an hour and just relaxed and listened? When's the last time that you enjoyed life so deeply you just had to smile? Maybe today you need to begin to block out some of the noise and find a time to just relax just a little bit to see if God has something to say to you. How can we walk with a God that we can't hear? I've got a special friend of mine. I'm going to show you a picture of her. This is Betty. Betty spends a lot of time with me when it's not being borrowed by one of my children. Like right now, I won't mention his name. Betty, every time we go on a long trip, Betty goes with us, especially if if we don't know exactly where we're going, so we named her Betty. And I love Betty. You know, if ever I'm going somewhere and I get off track, Betty's there with her sweet, loving, feminine voice, recalibrating. Go 2 blocks, make a U-turn, and come back. And she is so comforting because I know that Betty is there for me and with me. She's my navigational system. And we have a navigational system in God, and many times we are so busy doing our own thing that we don't listen to what God is trying to say to us like Betty does for me. Now there are times though that when I'm on a trip, especially by myself, and like on 75 heading south to a conference or something, and Betty doesn't say anything. I miss Betty. I wish she would say, Tom. I love you, Tom. Except, move your feet, make a right on exit 342 or whatever. And there are times in your life when you're trying to listen to God, you've got to be okay with the silence. God is saying, how to get through this season in your life, this moment in your destiny, this present danger that you're facing. I'm going to help you navigate it. Just slow up just a little bit. I like the scripture that says, if God is for you, does anybody know the rest of it? Who can be against you? If God is for you, who? Say it. Who? Sounds like much owl. Like it. Who can be against you? When you got things that come in your life, when you got enemies that confront you, when you got situations that want to bring you down, what we need to do is say, who do you think you are? Because if God is for us, who can be against us? This brings us to the guy I want to talk about this morning, a great Old Testament prophet in the Old Testament I just love to read about, a guy named Elijah. I think Elijah was a guy that's a lot like us in our culture today. Elijah liked the noise. He liked the loud things. He liked the boom. He liked all the manifestations of God. And he got it quite often. There was an occasion where many of the people were worshiping this false god named Baal. Baal did all kind of wicked things. And Elijah called this conference, and he told the prophets of Baal to build their altar, to give their sacrifice, to pray to their God, and he would build his altar and give his sacrifice. And so they began to wail and weep and cut themselves, and Elijah began some smack talking and asking him, where's your God? Is he, is in the bathroom and stuff like that. It's in the Hebrew text. I didn't make that up. And nothing happens. And then Elijah says, all right, enough of this. And so he says to the people, get some water and just dump it on my sacrifice. And they dump some water on the gallons of it. He goes, now do some more. And they dump some more on his sacrifice until it's completely soaked and the water's running all over the ground. And I said, all right, God, do your thing. Let's show these people who's the real God. And he says a prayer, and the heavens open up, and this column of fire comes down and just consumes the altar, even drying up all the water that's around. Elijah's feeling pretty good. The people that he convinced began to whip up on the people that were for Baal, this god. And so he began to feel pretty good about stuff. But the word got back to this woman named Jezebel, who was married to this lily-livered, spineless king named Ahab. And when she found out what Elijah had done, she was not happy. So she calls her posse together and basically says, look, I want you to go find Elijah, and I want you to bring his head back. So now we find this Elijah, this man of faith, who is running for his life. Where's he going? He's going to a mountain range called Mount Horeb, which is a part of the mountain range where God had appeared to Moses. So I think that Elijah is running to the place where he knew God showed up a lot of times. And the next thing we know, we find Elijah, and he's hiding in a cave. And as he's sitting there in the cave, this is what the Bible says. 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 9. Then he went into a cave and he spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him. What are you doing in here, Elijah? What were you doing in there, Elijah? This man that had so much faith and so much boldness that he would have a confrontation with the prophets of Baal, 350, 400 of these guys. He was willing to do that, and now he's cowering in a cave. The guy that prayed to God and fire came down. And he's hiding from this woman in a cave. Most of the time when God is leading you somewhere, the somewhere is not as important as what He's trying to do in your life. The journey is sometimes more important than the destination. And I would be even as bold to say that the journey is probably most of the time more important than the destination. And quite often we are praying about the wrong thing. We're praying about the destination. We're praying about the place that we want to get to. Where God is saying that as you are making your journey, as I'm leading you where I want you to go, the destination is secondary. I'm trying to teach you how to listen to me. He's trying to train us to be able to hear His voice. God was testing Elijah to train him to listen to his voice under pressure. And God might be using the cave in your life, the journey that you're on. Basically, it's your workout room where God is building your faith. You're saying to yourself, Lord, I don't know how I don't know how I'm going to do this. Lord, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Lord, I don't know how I'm going to pay that bill. Lord, I don't know when I get there what I'm going to do. And God is saying, just listen to me. Just listen to me. Just take a step. Just take a step by faith and listen to me. Just keep taking. And you're like, Lord, I don't know where my next step's going to go. God said, let me worry about the details. God's not big on giving you all the details as your journey. God just says, keep on walking. Keep on walking and listen to my voice. I know in our culture, and this is important, about having strategies and plans and things in your life. It's good to have a goal and steps to reach that goal. And sometimes I have folks come to me, Tom, what's a 10-year plan for North Point Christian Church? And of course, I've got this idea of where I would like us to be. But to be honest with you, when somebody says, what's your 10-year plan? I can tell you about tomorrow. All I know is that God is saying, just take a step. Just take a step. And we'll kind of figure it out as we get there. And just listen to his voice. And maybe that's where you are this morning, that you're just taking those steps and you don't know where your next step is going to land. You want to make God laugh, just give him all of your plans. I read one time, I think it was Erwin McManus, that says that when you make your plans, make sure you carry along a big eraser. Because God has a way of changing sometimes the thing that you've got in your mind as we try to dictate to God what our plans are, and God says, well, just back up just a little bit. But just start walking. Start walking. We all need him. But Betty tells us, recalibrating. Maybe you turn 2 months, and 2 months or 4 months. Sometimes when Betty speaks to me, I sure miss you, Betty. And when you begin to focus on what God might say to you, and once you begin to see God working in your life, then you realize how much you missed in speaking to you. And quite often we want God to speak in the midst of our insecurities, and God is saying, no, just keep taking steps. Sometimes when our friends that we've been so used to holding on to, or all the situations, that undergirds our life are not there, God has you in that cave exactly where he wants you, because he wants to be alone with you. And he wants you to understand that as you look back in your life, that it was him all along. It was him. And you know because you know because you know. You just know. Now some of you ladies already are pretty good at that. The Bible says that those that are led by the Spirit of God shall be called sons of God. Some of you ladies, you'll go to a department store, maybe it's in the mall or somewhere in Dillard's, and you're looking through the dress rack, and you're looking at every dress on that rack, even the ones that's not your size. But you've got to look at every one of them as your husband has to sit bored to tears over in the chair as you're going, I'm sorry, but step by step. And then the clerk will come up to you. Can I help you? And what do you generally say, ladies, when she comes up and says, no, I'm just looking? Now, does she give up? No. She comes back and she goes, well, have you seen this? We just got this in yesterday from New York. And you've already said, no, I'm just looking, which means leave me alone. But she comes back. And you say, no, thank you. I'll know what I want when I see it. You know when you know what you're looking for. And sometimes that's the way God works with us. Your daughter brings home this hairy legs kid, boy. And you're thinking, no. That boy ain't nothing but trouble. goes yourself right on out of here. You don't know who the one is, but you know who is not, and it's not him. And so you're shoving him out the door. You know because you know. Well, God's not finished with Elijah. As a matter of fact, the Bible tells us this. And as Elijah is sitting in the cave and God is asking, so what you doing here? He says this, I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. I'm on your team. I'm doing good religious stuff for you. So the Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. And I'm the only one left. And now they are trying to kill me too. God, I've been doing all kinds of stuff for you. And man, there's nobody that's supporting me at all. It's just me, God, all by myself. I'm all alone. And now they're trying to kill me. God, can't you see I'm doing good stuff for you? Isn't it amazing that you can do a lot of stuff for God and still not know Him? And we are such strange creatures sometimes. We find ourselves in the midst of a pressure situation. When we find ourselves in our cave, instead of stopping and being quiet and trying to reorient ourselves, we just bounce from one place to the other, and God is just trying to catch up with us. When we're being bombarded with a cacophony of noise, we hear God who says to us, as in Psalms 46:1, tells us this, God is our refuge and strength, ever-present help in trouble. Well, that word trouble is a very interesting word back in the Hebrew language in which that has been translated. That word trouble had the idea of being pressed in. I should have typed this up and given us a southern translation. I'm just going to give it to you. Those of you that have been born and raised in the South, you'll understand this. God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help when we're between a rock and a hard place. That's exactly what he's saying here. And he goes on in that very same Psalm and he says this, be still and know that I am God. And actually the Hebrew is, this is the word that we've added to English to help us in the translation to flow on, but actually it's just a word, still. It's still. Still. And know that I'm God. It's still. When my kids were small, every once in a while, Dominic, you're going to be sorry if you ever sit on this front row. I like to use this. But sometimes when my kids kind of get out of, when they were small, they don't do it as much anymore. But when they were smaller, they would get a little agitated and get all kind of hyper and everything. And sometimes I would say anything. Just my hand on their head. You know what I was saying? Just be still. Just get control. Everything's going to be all right. That's my favorite head in the whole place. Just be still. And God, and sometimes in our life, we're just getting all agitated. We're running around like a chicken with their head cut off. Another southern phrase. God is just still. Relax. It's okay. I got this. And God says, I've got a cave just where you can once again hear my voice. And sometimes God allows calamities to use them as opportunities to train you to develop that inner ear. To use those calamities as a stepping stone to get to know Him better. And sometimes we see God more clearly in the dark places. It's kind of a paradox. Sometimes we need a separation to bring us to the point of dedication. You go back to the Old Testament, you look at a guy named Jacob who had been estranged from his brother Esau when he sold his birthright, and all the blessings from God that'll kind of do that to you. And so he takes off until he knew Esau was going to kill him. Years later, he's coming back with his family, and he's going to meet Esau the next day. He doesn't know whether Esau is going to kill him and his family or not. And so he goes out in the desert alone. Guess who he meets? God. You go into the New Testament, you find a guy named Paul, became an apostle. He writes probably 2/3 of our New Testament. Well, guess where Paul writes most of these scriptures? It's in a prison. By himself. Now we find Elijah. The cave's dark, it's dingy, it's dirty, it's lonely, and it's quiet. Quit fighting being alone. God might find it easier to whisper to you when you're alone. God gives alone. He says this to Elijah. And the Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord. So he's going to say, get outside the cave for a minute. For the Lord is about to pass by, and then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face, and he went out and he stood at the mouth of the cave. There should be a seat in there. Cave. And then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? There was no her with Elijah in the cave. I could proofread this, but so it's interesting. Elijah goes out the cave, and when the mountains begin to crumble, when the earth begins to shake, when the fire begins to come, when the wind begins to blow like a hurricane, he's fine with that. But just as soon as God begins to whisper to him, man, he begins to crumble. He liked big manifestations. But when God began to whisper, he just couldn't take it. And we're that way a lot of times. It's a lot easier to tolerate a God in the distance, the distant thunder of God. But you know, when you whisper to somebody, you got to bring them up close. To whisper. When Elijah got real close to God, it was almost more than he could bear. When God brings you up real close to whisper, don't pull the covers over your head and miss the destiny that God has for you. God wanted more than just success for Elijah. He wanted his ear. God wanted to know that he could change Elijah's direction. And this morning, God wants to know if he can get all up in your business and in your plans. God might want to take you in the cave. You might be shocked by being in that cave because you know what, God is there. You might be shocked by what's going in your life, but God is not. And you can be rest assured of this, is that God has the answer before you have the question.